Come now, all you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm. If your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Jeffy, my boy, on with the show. Well, shiver me timbers.
To our listeners from across all regions of the planet, welcome once again aboard the Robin Hood, flagship to the world's one and only cooperatively inspired charity podcast network, WPRPN.
Live streaming from under some of South Korea's most heavily sprayed mid-November skies. You're listening to episode 129 of Pirate Radio Podcasts.
I'm your host, as always, the ship's chief communications officer, Jaffe Ryder.
Former airline pilot, author, documentary filmmaker, live streamer, and spiritual seeker, Aage Nost returns to the Robin Hood for his third official visit since we launched our pirate radio project just a couple of years ago. It's been a little more than a year now since we last managed to hook up with Aage, so we'll naturally have a lot of catching up to do. If 90 minutes isn't quite enough to cover all the topics we hope to get to this week, as is so often the case, we'll simply have to steer the quality conversation back on out into the Rogues Gallery after-show area.
Well, I'm sure some of it is. I believe so, yeah, and this is going to be fun. Well, yeah, I could do that. I'll try to make it as short and concise as possible. I was born in Europe. Northern Europe. I've been in Norway on a farm up there and grew up, became an agronomist, and finally figured it out that that's not what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to the United States to become a pilot, commercial pilot. And I did that, worked for other people for 3 years, and then me and a partner started a flight school that grew into an international air taxi and an air carrier for us. And I flew for a living, more or less, office work and whatever in between, for 23 years, and I burned out. I guess it doesn't matter, if you do too much of it, it becomes just another job. And I quit flying and I started doing other things. I started looking into mind development. I started painting, and I got hooked up with some people that had a mind development course, and I was teaching that for a year. That Zox Pro, the training course, the mind development course, and that did some phenomenal things, and I learned a lot. One of the things they do is to show you how you can fly through a book in about 5 minutes and take a written test on it and score in 95%. In other words, you have as close to photographic memory as you can get. So that's one of the things. And I started doing radio interviews, and I did host and produce 2 TV shows in Tucson for 6 years. Got very political. And I ended up, they talked me finally into getting on the ballot and running for Congress. And I did that, didn't win, of course, but I've done a lot, and I tell you, for the most of my life, I've done what I love to do. Because you remember that saying, find something you love to do and you will never work a day in your life. I think I pretty much have done that, and I've been very lucky. I've been lucky that I haven't been lazy, and what I'm doing right now is so much fun, it probably should be illegal. I do, me and some other people, we do two radio shows on a podcast, and I'm interviewed 2 or 3 times a week on other radio stations, and that brought me here. So thank you, Rafi. Yeah, my tongue didn't work.
Here we go. I think I just discovered. I was going to say Rafi. I think you might be getting me confused with the children's entertainment personality, but that's
Oh,
okay. It's just it's a simple what is it, consonant,
yeah.
kind of jumbled up there. Bigger problems yet. What we had happening here was, for some reason, my levels were completely muted, and they had for some reason magically reset themselves so that our audience was getting no sound there with the introduction. It looks like we are basically, what I'm seeing here from this end, at least, that we're good to go and back in the saddle here once again. So great. Thank you, Pirate Joe Emanon, for that. Presumably everybody was able to hear Augie's introduction there. Very thorough and concise, at the same time to the point way of just encapsulating his life story all within the course of just a minute or two, really. So now Val,
Yeah, that's
Val
all
was,
there's.
go ahead, Augie.
That's all there is to it. Minute or two.
Yeah, sure. So, but Val was asking here, what is the topic for this week's conversation? And what you heard, Augie, but our listeners did not, was my response. And what I had to say to that simply was, with you being here once again, hopefully third time a charm, at least from this point on, we got the audio levels up there and in place, that we'll be getting into all kinds of different areas, including the books that you've published, documentaries you worked on, as you mentioned in your introduction there, of course, so many other things with the live streaming broadcast team Alpha, Nori Love and Tom Schaefer. That's the ongoing project, which has really a lot of appeal, I think, to a fair number of people. Obviously, a lot of great content as well too. So it's pretty much, we're going to take the conversation wherever it happens to lead. I've got some notes here, some talking points, but really,
you can start out. You're the driver here, so I'll just ride back seat with you, and we'll have a nice conversation.
This week's co-pilot. So that's there you go. A position that, I guess, since you've been retired. Well, how long exactly then is it that you've been retired from professional airline business?
Let's see. I think I just quit flying in 1995.
Well, presumably then, you managed to set aside a bit of a nest egg and have, shifted your focus and priorities elsewhere. So, but as you've, said and made clear, I've heard you talk about this now on numerous occasions, that flying it got to lose its appeal after a while. Kind of sad.
It can do that. Actually, it doesn't matter what you do, but flying it's extremely interesting. It's exciting. But when you get to the point where you are more comfortable getting in the airplane than you are getting in your car, you could become dangerous to yourself. And I found myself being so comfortable that I was sitting down, going down the airways, hundreds of miles an hour, reading a newspaper, letting the autopilot fly the airplane and not looking outside like I should. So I was actually an accident waiting to happen. And I quit before I allowed that to happen. And I would advise anybody else to do the same thing, because we need to be at about 110% in the cockpit all the time, thinking at least 5 to 10 miles ahead of the airplane to anticipate what is down there. And I wasn't doing that. So that's why I quit.
Isn't that something? And, it's often said as well that driving the automobiles is, in fact, statistically proven itself to be far more dangerous than the airline. So given your career choice and selection, of course, I can see that how it would be, exactly as you say, very dangerous, in that you have switched over to the autopilot sort of mode, and you're not on top of your game there, in the zone, and as focused as you really need to be when you're behind the wheel of an automobile. Very dangerous. So, all right. Well, we've got up to already now 7 live listeners and viewers, people taking in the slideshow, that is. So we did manage to put together as many quality photos that we could get a hold of and from you, Aage. One of the things I got to say with respect to this particular issue, however, is I just don't think there's enough quality photos of yourself. You got to do more to update what you've got available, publicity shots and all that kind of stuff. And the ones that we did get a hold of were fairly small. So with the pixelation or the just the size, basically. So something, food for thought, I suppose. And I'm not sure if you have those skills exactly, but maybe somebody the likes of Tommy Shutter would be more qualified and cut out. There's a nice picture of you right there. In the red shirt there. Looks like you're out at a some kind of festival. Maybe that's are you into auto racing as well too, as I recall, or am I mistaken on that front?
Oh, no, not really. I don't do any of that, but I've been to the Reno air races, and that was kind of fun, but otherwise racing I don't get involved with anymore.
Okay, you're a resident of Tucson, Arizona, which I'm not sure how far exactly. Is it much of a stretch from Phoenix?
It's about an hour and a half drive.
Okay.
To the edge of town.
You're familiar, though, I'm sure, in a pretty big way. I would be willing to bet. I can't clearly recall, but presumably you've looked into this whole business of the Phoenix Lights.
Oh yeah, I have, and there's so many theories about that, and of course nobody really know anything, but we can anticipate with strong indications to. We look at the technology and everything that they saw, we can see that there were definitely something there. It was not a hallucinations, but I have gone on record actually talking about something that is a little different. Most people think that this was an alien spacecraft. Well, we don't know that either. We said this is a Black Project spacecraft. Well, of course we don't know that either. But what if it was a holographic image that they test flew at night? It could perfectly well be done. I know that there is possible to do holographic images even in the dark, because the light is still projected out of the camera. So yeah, they could do this. So I don't know if there were no sound or anything that would give it away otherwise. So we really don't know what it was, but it was very interesting. Thousands of people saw it, so it cannot be explained away. It was there.
A whole series of different theories. TR-3B, I believe, is one of the allegedly back-engineered spacecraft that people often talk about. So that would be the triangular shaped craft. I'm not sure what sizes they're said to come in exactly, but and then come again.
The 3B is not big enough to be the one over Phoenix.
Yeah. Now, was there only one craft that was said to have been sighted or seen, or was there a whole series of different shapes? And a variety of phenomenon?
Well, there are some that say there were more than one, but it's the big one that they say most of the pictures were on, and that's what we probably would be concerned about. What was that?
This is an interesting tie-in too, because I'm not sure if you know about this or not, but apparently there was a pilot who called in during the course of the so-called, the Phoenix Lights sightings, and lodged an official report to who I'm not too clear exactly, but it was a big deal that people who've looked into this know about this mystery pilot, as it were. Do you know actually... and I'll tell you right off the bat, I do know who this was. So just it's kind of a rhetorical question. Do you know who the pilot was?
No.
Kurt Russell, the Hollywood actor.
Oh yeah. I know. In his statement, he said that he saw it. Yeah.
Do you know? And can you provide any details then as to what he?
No. I'm not in on that.
It's interesting, the geography. I'm quite fascinated where you are located in the world. Alice Cooper is another individual who a lot of people don't know about. And we're talking now the heavy rock goth music star, who himself, surprise, surprise, just so happens to be a born-again Christian, believe it or not. But he himself, according to what Grant Cameron shared with us when he dropped by the Robin Hood, was that Alice Cooper has for the longest time now quietly supported and funded ufological studies and investigation. So I'm not sure. Have you ever heard Alice Cooper's name mentioned within the context of things?
I have not heard that.
Bit of a surprise, perhaps. So yeah, a lot of people have not. Thought I'd just throw that out there. So, but one of the things that we're hoping to get more into, and we're kind of skirting around the real, perhaps, heart of the matter here, is the so-called secret space program. You have a few opinions to offer on this whole matter. In fact, you produced I'm looking at it right now, Skinwalker Open Files, Volume 6. I'm not sure how many videos within this series you were a actual contributor to, or had a role to play in things. But what can you tell us then of the secret space program and what you found over the course of your investigations?
Well, we found that it is definitely there. Because we can see some of there were Michael Schratt actually has done a lot of research on that, and we're going to interview him tomorrow on the broadcast team Alpha. He has a lot of documentation that he got out of government records showing actually where some of the money was funneled off into secret programs like this. So it is there. It's just a matter of knowing how much money was funneled. You know, the day before 9/11, 2001, the Secretary of Defense came on TV and said, we don't know where $3 trillion went. We cannot find it. Well, of course, that's a big lie. They know where it went, because when money goes out of an account, somebody has to sign for it. Well, they evidently didn't want to tell us where this $3 trillion. Now there are accountants coming out of the Pentagon later on that has said that no, that number is not right. It is more like $9 trillion. And then we hear rumors, of course, that it's close to 20. Well, I don't know anymore, but I can kind of lean towards the 9 trillion because that comes out of the Pentagon. And when you think about something like this, $9 trillion, that is slightly less than half of the national debt that is accumulated since the country started. So yeah, they could perfectly well build a well-established secret space program, underground tunnels going across the world. We have pictures of some of the boring machines where they are like 60 feet across the mouth of the boring machine. So they make tunnels going just about everywhere, from major cities, even overseas, under the ocean. So yeah, it is there. And we also have Corey Good is coming out and talking about some of it. So, and he's not the only one. There's a lot of whistleblowers now that is coming out and speaking of the same thing. And I have a little different view on some of it, as I have, this is going to get involved. As an astral traveler, you can go and you can see things, you can experience things, and you can have an up-close view of things. So I have a little different view. And also some 4.5 years ago, I had an incredible experience when I had the universe downloaded into my mind, basically in full detail and concept with full understanding. So I have a little bit different view of it than some of the things that is coming out. Maybe more in detail, but I haven't talked a lot about that because some of it is hard to believe when it talks about the bases on the moon that is set up by the secret space program, the slave labors that is used up there from people disappearing on Earth and things like that. I don't know. Whatever you think, we could go anywhere you want to go, but this is pretty controversial.
Yeah, I was just doing a brief search via DuckDuckGo here while you were laying that out for our listeners. Harry Reid is one of the senators and he's out of the state of Nevada. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he actually took his seat back just recently with the midterms, or if he had even maybe had retired from politics. I think he's still in office. But that aside, it looks like, did you hear the reports of him, how, according to some of what we see here, he fought to save the secret UFO program? Do you know about Harry Reid's role with it? And the the money as well too? He had pretty central, prominent role in things there to the tune of,
Yeah.
countless millions.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that Harry Reid said he was not going to run for re-election. That may have been him. I think it was him, but maybe he realized that he wasn't going to win, so it's better to retire, but it's hard to say. He's been on many committees controlling the money for the country for a long time, so he is one of the really big and well-connected corrupt individuals in Washington. So yeah, he's got his finger on the pulse.
Yes, indeed. It's a bit of a side here, too, but while we're on the topic of Harry Reid, I know George Knapp seems to want to sing his high praises, and, I don't often go out of my way to take exception to or, see myself as having any difference of opinion with respect to what Mr. Knapp puts out there for as far as his views and opinions are concerned, but a very corrupt individual as well, too, as many of these career politicians tend to be, including his son. So I don't know if you followed all that took place just a couple of years ago as far as the Bureau of Land Management and the I guess it was a lot of the free men of the land, or the ranchers in Nevada and Oregon, and I think even as far as over as place Utah, even maybe as well too. There's like almost an underground, the network of ranchers and so forth. But anyways, it turns out that Harry Reid and his son are tied to some very crooked land deals with the Chinese Communist government. If people haven't heard about this, DuckDuckGo is the way to do it. Friends, foes, and fellow pirate mateys. So yeah, any thoughts, Aage?
Well, I know that up in that part of the country up there in the northwest, there were some ranchers that found actually the law that was circumvented. And they found out that, wait a minute, the government is holding this land, but they have no right to it. So they challenged the government on it. And the leader of them, you probably know, he got killed in an ambush. But they wanted to get rid of this movement because the government did not want to give up the land. So yeah, they took care of business, and now, of course, everything is back to pretty much normal. They killed the opposition, so to speak. Then that's normally what they do. And you probably heard about that story, I'm sure. And I'm
kill the best and buy the rest is how Canada's singer-songwriter Bruce Colburn has put it in his song. They call it Democracy. So let's see here. Once again, just running a quick web search while you had taken the ball, and Lavoy Finicum was his name, and they murdered him in cold blood. It was, I think, a headshot, and the FBI opened fire on those two little girls there. I think there was two little girls. I'm not sure who else. Might have been a male in the front seat, two girls there in the back, and it was just pretty awful, and goes to show for me, I was quite amazed that we had a former guest, Adam Go Rightly, actually was his name. Actually, has yet to take up our offer to an invitation to return to the show, which is fine. But he really wanted to talk about this whole issue of the free men of the land and the ranchers and so forth. And I was surprised because he's into this whole Discordian thing, which is a kind of spoof religion. And my impression was that he would be more of a liberty and freedom promoting type individual. But as things turned out, he was all for the state and state power and stateism, as it were. So, people talk about there is no, when it comes right down to it, left or right. It's only a matter or a question of freedom versus tyranny is what the deal is there, folks. The way they play off the left-right opposites. So, but anyways, yeah, so that's good. That's interesting to see you followed that issue, and I don't really know too much about the whole business.
I haven't really followed it because I don't watch TV anymore. I haven't done that for 2 years, and I think I'm better for it. I kind of raised my view of the outside world a little bit. I got a lot of positive going on, and I have designed a positive future for myself, and that's in the timeline I'm going. So that's what I'm going to stay with. Though it doesn't hurt to understand the problem, so that once we understand the problem, we can more observe it from a distance, but don't dwell on it, because whatever we have in our mind the most prominent, that is what we're going to have in our life, in this mind-created universe that we are playing in. So if we think about problems all the time, we're going to have more problems. And of course, we've been starting out this here show for the first 30 minutes talking about problems. But it's okay, but as long as we also talk about solutions. Because problems, they're going to be there. But as long as we understand it, and then forget about it, because then when we know what to do to solve the problem, we should bury ourselves in the problem-solving process. And that is one of the things that the ultra-wealthy people in the world are doing. When they have a challenge, they analyze the challenge, and they do that within their inner circle of the inner circle is what they call it. And they discuss it, brainstorm it. They found which avenue is the best one to solve the challenge. And then they totally forget about the challenge. They just bury themselves in the problem-solving process and don't even look back. And if we did that, we would be a lot further ahead. And that is exactly what I write about in the Universal Success Principles on how billionaires think. I've been very lucky. I'm on first name with 3 billionaires, and I've learned a lot from them. And they talk about these success principles as it is the average day to them. And most people, they really have no clue about what does it take to reach those level of business. You don't do it alone. You do it within the mastermind. And that's another thing that I could talk about, because we have started one of those and we are in the process of starting another one. So people can expand their horizon. And the more they expand it, read good books and associate with successful people, associate with good people that raise their vibration, so to speak. And then they are on a different path. If we haven't done that before and we start doing that, we start a new timeline that has different things in it. And it will bring us to a different destination. And this is one of the things that education, they don't teach us stuff like this. So, and there's a reason for that. They, like George Carlin says, they love stupid people. Well, stupid and ignorance is two different things. I would say most people are ignorant. I think most people are not stupid. But ignorant, I am ignorant on an awful lot of things. I guarantee you that I am very ignorant when it comes to brain surgery. I guarantee you wouldn't want me to operate on you because I would kill you. And the same thing with other things. People are ignorant on many things, and success principle is one of them. If we start studying these things, our lives would change. And I've been talking too much. Now it's your turn.
No, that's fine, Aage. That's that's what you're here for. We want to hear what it is that you have to share with us, impart your thoughts, views, insight, and ultimately, I think, from what I can tell, there's a little bit of wisdom there as well, too. So, and there's not too much that I can really take exception to or disagree with as far as what you've just unpacked over the past minute or so. But God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. So I think you're talking about becoming engaged, and absolutely, I couldn't agree more that we have to understand there's only so much in our lives we can affect. And when we see Donald Trump or some other politician up there or government corruption running amok, there's only so much we can do. The overspending, the missing Pentagon trillions. We can rant and rave and pull our hair out and, lose sleep over these things or not. It's up to each of us, as you say. Yeah. And I get that. And so I'm totally on board with what you're saying here. Absolutely. And it resonates with me very much. So, but, at the same time, I do think it's important as engaged citizens. Some people like to refer to people as activists, if they take exception to the official narrative or are in some people's eyes maybe anti-establishment or just dare to question what they're being told via the television, which, as with yourself, us here as well, have not bothered to turn on as far as the cable is concerned in at least the past, I'm thinking 10 years now or so. But, so we want to get into this a little more. Obviously, yes, the mastermind principle and broadcast team Alpha. You did have it was a series of talks that you put forward, recorded, and I think even live streamed. I was just listening to one of them before we launched this week's show. So yourself, Tom Schaefer, of course, and Nori Love. Maybe that would be a good place to take things here at the moment, shift the focus to. What can you tell us about what you managed to record and what you've got coming up next? It sounds like you're going to be following up here on things quite shortly.
Yeah, this mastermind, it is not very well understood. And see, the thing is that we can affect more than what we think we can. We can do more than what we think we can do. And everything starts in the mind, because quantum physics has proven to us, and there are solid physical experiments proving that is true, that we live in a mind-created universe. If that is the case, whatever is in our mind is what we can create in our life. So we should think about that a little bit. There's some solutions in there. And the mastermind is one of them. The definition of a mastermind is when two or more minds are united in harmony. They create a third mind that has the potential mind power of the two or more of them multiplied by each other. And if there's 1,000 people listening to a radio show, and then they join minds and think about the same thing, think about the solution to the same challenge, and direct their attention in that area, now you have the mind power of 1,000,000 minds. That is powerful. Think about what Art Bell did 20-some years ago when Texas hadn't had rain for 4 months or so. And it was burning up. There was brush fires everywhere. Towns were running out of water. And Art Bell, he told his listeners, which was over 10 million at that time, think of rain over Texas. And we all did. I was listening. And the next day there were thunderstorms all over Texas. And the weather forecasters came out and said, we don't understand. There were no moisture anywhere in the computer models. But that could create this rain. But it happened. They didn't understand it. Well, I understood it. It was our mastermind that created the rain out of absolutely nothing because there was no moisture. We can do the same thing. We are doing that right now in our mastermind group that we're doing. And we're starting another one. I would love to have all of you that is listening to this come and join us. And in order to do that, go to our website for that as broadcastteamalpha.com. and go to the contact page, give us your name and your email address, and tell us that you like to be part of the mastermind group or whatever else that we want to do. So join us, because you can be part of something like this, because this mastermind, it reaches into the quantum, and that's where everything past, present, and future is. If we visualize something with intention, gratitude, love, colorful images, and in intention, I mentioned that, and we put that in one direction, it's not just a thought anymore, it is now an energy. And that energy can change physical reality, because physical reality is created by the mind. So our mind is now changing the physical reality. There are some solid experiments within quantum mechanics that prove that the present can actually change the past. Now that one is hard to wrap our heads around, but it has been experiment proving this is possible. And of course, Art Bell he proved it also possible, because in the future, at that time, there was rain. So he had to bring that back to the past where the rain was needed. So this gets a little involved, but this is something that we want to do on a real big scale, and I think that it could be a lot of fun. And one of the things that we also want to concentrate on is health. For everybody that is involved in this, we want to focus on everybody's health. And we have seen that makes a difference. So I think it could be very interesting for people to join us. Now, another thing is that for the mastermind, let's say that we have let's say 1,000 people listening, and then we place that recording of that session into some place where people can go and listen to it later on. Well, let's say that somebody goes tomorrow and want to listen to the same recording. When they focus on the recording, they are focusing what happened in the recording, because their focus goes out of the physical into the quantum reality or the higher vibrations, and it latches on to that recording, which recorded the past at the time. So technically, the effects of them going to listen to it tomorrow will have effects today, the day before that they are actually listening to it. This one is hard to wrap our heads around too, because outside of the physical, above the physical vibrations, time as we know it does not exist. It is past, present, and future is sitting there in that soup of creation, ready for us to interact with and draw on it, draw things that we are interested in having in our reality here, draw it back to us, into the physical. There's a process for that. And it has to go through the physical process of creating it, but the universe also takes care of that. So this can get very interesting, because we have more than one reality, and that's another one. That's where our requests go and our thoughts go. They don't go into the physical. They go outside of the physical. So in a way, you are brainstorming with the universal consciousness. Another name for that is God. How would you like to brainstorm with God? That could be interesting.
Yeah, the Eastern concept of non-duality, I believe, is one you are somewhat familiar with, correct?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So very prominent, central tenet of what are known as the Dharmic religions, Hinduism and Buddhism primarily, in that there is no, the way of looking at it, uh, in a nutshell, and I wish I was more of an expert on the matter, but simple layman's terms, that there is no separation, neither within ourselves nor without. That all that we observe and view as being separate from ourselves is in fact one, that it's indivisible, that we're born. You know, there's these people out there, I guess, who are trying to impose, and I don't think you're one of them, Augie. I think you're a little different, more along the lines of this dharmic type approach. But the faux singularity is what I like to refer to it as, with the use of technology and cybernetics, and just, you know, plugging into everything at all times with your smart technology, wherever you can possibly manage. But the way I look at it, once again, is it's a false singularity, that we don't have to conjure anything further than what we already have, because of the fact that, once again, we're born into it. We live our lives constantly connected to and tied into this inherent oneness of the cosmos, and then we return to it once again when we die, and we lose our body is sheds away from us, and
Mm-hmm. Yep.
there we go. It's all gone. But return to pure consciousness, I suppose. Now, one of the things here that really I think is important, though, and key for people probably to remember, is the whole business of mindfulness. To, you know, you can say that, sure, we're all one, and we're all born from out of the oneness, and live our lives through the course of our existence here on Earth in that state. But without mindfulness, I think that's maybe where we perhaps end up making, as you say, because of ignorance, leading to bad decisions and ultimately, of course, outcomes. And then it's important to maintain our focus and be aware of and reflect upon, what could be the consequences of taking this course of action? Will it render positive or negative results? So what are your thoughts on mindfulness and being in the moment?
Well, that's being in the moment is fine, but I tell you though, there is also something about being in the future, because in a split second, the moment will become past. And that's the problem, that most people, they spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning their life. Now that's a tough one to realize. And the thing is that whatever is in our mind is going to be in our life. So let's decide what we want in our life. Let's first of all know what we want. And we place that into the future. Let's say at a time-coded event like a Christmas party. We know what we want, and at that day, we already have it. From there on, we visualize it with colorful images, gratitude, love, and other people involved with it, enjoying it. And then we go back and forth, visualize that thing every day as we do everything we can to help make that happen. Because now you're being drawn up that timeline, and you lay down a tractor strings through to it. And when that time comes, chances are you will walk right into it, and it is yours. But it's because you planned it, you visualized it, you loved it, you lived it before you had it. You felt that gratitude of having it before you had it. That's the spiritual language. It is not one of words. Words are worthless. God doesn't understand German or Chinese. I'm using God here as a metaphor, and because it's It's that universal consciousness that controls everything, and that is done through the universal laws, which we are talking about this month on Broadcast Team Alpha. And this is something that when you start diving into this, your life changes, your vibration changes, you start drawing people to you of a higher caliber, and you have newer maybe and better friends, and things change once you start changing yourself. Because it's obvious, if all we're thinking about is crime and drugs and how to screw the next guy, and yeah, that's all we're going to have. If we think about good things, that is what's drawn to us. So this is something that I've been kind of preaching for a while, and a lot of people are listening. And in that book about spiritual science, higher conscious thinking, and how to access the universal consciousness, I go into the small details that work so well in creating that future, and how to pave it before you have to walk it. In fact, I go into even as far as reversing the aging process. There's a process for that, because in 2009, 3 doctors got the Nobel Prize for discovering an enzyme that reverses the aging process, and nobody seems to know about it. Well, in the book you can read about it, and the process for it is so simple. And I'm doing that process, and I think it's kind of expensive. It probably cost me about $20-30 a month on what I do and what I take. So this is something that everybody can do. And I know, looking at me, I'm 72, almost 73 years old. I have more energy than somebody half or a third my age. I work 16-hour days, and I don't take breaks. And I don't look my age, and I don't have much for gray hair. So yeah, I think I'm doing all right for my age. And that is part of what I'm doing that is caused to that. Normally, people my age, they're about 10, 15 pharmaceuticals by now, and they do basically, nothing. They're retired. Of course, go golfing maybe, and I'm hurting knees, and I don't even dare to think about it.
What is it? We're going to ask you this next question here in just one moment. What it is that you have to shell out for, invest in basically every month to the tune of between $20 and $30 each every month. But well, before Aage, before we take off down that rabbit hole, let's just remind people we are chatting here with Aage Nost, retired airline pilot, author, documentary filmmaker, and we want to get a little more into that documentary that you've released dealing with the secret space program and Agenda 21, an interesting tie-in there too. So really a jack of all trades, man of many hats, what I personally like to refer to as a spiritual seeker of sorts, among many other things, of course, too. We've got a little more than half an hour left here, episode number 129 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. So let's hear it then, Aage. Between $20 and $30 per month is what you've been investing in, and then we'll maybe shift the focus to your documentary film.
Okay, well, it's really very simple, because I did some research into aging, and I found several people that is very old. One guy I found, Li Qingyuan over in China, the government verified his age at the age of 264 years old, and he died from an accident. He was a martial art instructor for the army in China for as long as anybody could remember. And I did some more digging, and I found in foreign newspapers, I found out what he did to become that old. First of all, he knew he could never die. And for the second, he ate Chinese herbs and berries. And one herb particularly that there has been done some medical research on, and that is astragalus. And when it's done in conjunction with other things, which I explain in the book, then it has an anti-aging effect. There is also a medical team in the United States that did experiments on this, and they found that, yes, astragalus and with the cayenne pepper and several other things, it will reduce the aging process because it lengthens the telomeres at the end of the chromosomes that hold the genetic code of the human being. Because we know now, science has found what causes aging. It is because the telomeres are shortening at the end of the chromosome so much that they but every time the cell divide, the telomeres get a little shorter. When they divide a bunch of times, then they get so short it can no longer hold the chromosome together, and they fray at the ends, and the cells can no longer replicate themselves. So if the telomeres get longer, then the cells can replicate themselves, and you don't get stuck with old cells in the body, so your aging stops. And I'm seeing that happening. So there's something here that really people should look into. And of course, then again, I have heard people tell me, well, I'm not afraid of death. Well, I am not either. But I want to go that way when I want to do it, not necessarily when the body tells me to do it.
And what's the name of the food ingredient, Augie? I'm not sure the spelling. Astragalus, did you say?
Yeah, astragalus is a Chinese herb. And there's a medical team in the United States that I have a book on the shelf that explains this, and it's all in the book too. Astragalus root powder. It's if you take this in the large doses, it lengthens the telomeres. Sure. And if you also take it with pepper at the same time, you get many, many more times effective.
With cayenne pepper.
Yeah, or black pepper actually is probably better. Pepper works, but black pepper, I think it said in the book here. So that's something to consider. But there's other things I do too. That also there's another Chinese herb that is called the Immortality Herb, and there are things that they're doing in China that we in the West don't know how to do. Jiaogulan herb, that is the Immortality Herb in China, and of course he was taking that also. So well, you can read.
Sure, and we want to get a list of these herbs. Myself being situated here in South Korea, it's great to have a spouse, a Korean wife, who's very mindful and doting in some ways, really, which is kind of nice. I mean, hey, who doesn't like to be pampered and treated like a king from time to time? So, but no, she's really attentive and mindful, doing all she can to provide quality foods and diet that is of focused on the nutrition and well-being, with a heavy dose of traditional Chinese influences, I suppose, with the herbs and so forth. Yeah, I tell you, I really do. I'm blessed, so I'm really thankful for that, to have her and all that she has to offer on that front. But let's just, if we could, before I lose it here, astragamus, and then if we get the spelling there, and there's also somebody here too, let's not forget, I mean, because you just threw a figure out there, which naturally a lot of people are going to say, hey, wait a minute, let's have this, if we could, substantiated, of course. How old did he live to be? 264 years old? It's like, that's off the charts.
256 is what he was.
Now, but how do we prove that exactly, though? I mean, nobody seemed to remember. Go ahead.
No, there were government documents showing that. And in fact, there's another story about ranks right up with this one. That was a Chinese university professor came to New York in the 1950s as an exchange program. And he one evening went out with some colleagues and had dinner, and he got food poisoning and died. And they got him to the morgue, and they started looking through his paper, and they called the ambassador and said, something's wrong here. This guy is 154 years old, and that can't be right. And the ambassador told them, yeah, that's true. And they say, how's that? And they said, well, first of all, he knew he could not die, and he only ate Chinese herbs and berries. So there is something about this. This was written up in papers at the time, and I think that somebody, don't take my word for it, go out and research it yourself. And you're going to find a lot of more people. There are people from the Middle East that has been up to 170 years old that is documented. So, but the West, we don't like to talk about this. It's never communicated because that, that's not good. Because, gosh, what will you think if people start doing that stuff? What will happen to Social Security and pension programs and the pharmaceuticals? They would lose money. So, yeah, can't have that.
You've outlined this, you've covered this in a couple of your books. You have as well a Amazon.com page and profile in place. Maybe you could just give a quick rundown so our listeners know what to look for when they head over to Amazon. Just type in Aage Nost. What are the book titles that they'll be trying to keep an eye out for?
Actually, I put it into the text section here, the direct link to it. It's, of course, my name will bring you to the book, Spiritual Science, Higher Conscious Thinking, and How to Access the Universal Consciousness.
Okay, so what we'll have to do is just copy that and share it in the YouTube chat, because unfortunately, well, you and I can see what's going on here in the Skype conversation area. Others out there in the wider listening and viewing community cannot. I'm just in the process of doing that right now. Why don't we then, unless there's anything more you'd like to add to things, shift the focus then to this secret space program documentary that you put together just in the last year or two, I guess, is how things, how it all kind of stacks up. Along with that, of course, you make the connection to some sort of tie into Agenda 21. What's going on there exactly?
Well, Agenda 21 is something that is really hard to wrap your head around, because it's there's so many things in there. Actually, some of the stuff in Agenda 21 could be good for mankind, but they also have a different view of mankind as in 2030. They want mankind to be about 500 million people globally. So that's the problem where I'm concerned. And we wonder, why in the world does world leaders around the globe in many, many big countries, why do they do what they do? Because they are so destructive to the environment. They're so destructive to society, their country. It seems like they want to tear everything down. But I have a little insight on that, because I have a friend over in Europe that works very involved in one of the governments in Europe, as similar to what would be a senator here, or a something similar. I rather not mention his name and where the country he's from, but he says that the reason that Markle and many of the other world leaders are doing what they do to destroy their society is because, first of all, it's being terraformed for another species that doesn't need what we have, and for the second is they are promised immortality. And that immortality can come in 3 or 4 different ways. Now, it's the same resultant effect with your consciousness would live on in a computer. And one of them is you do download all memory and knowledge into a computer chip, and that chip is installed into a human-looking android. And the technology is there right now. They can do that. And another one is they are growing a clone, and what some people say they can grow in a few days, that's not the way that it seems to be. And this clone will become a perfect version of themselves. Then they download all the memory and the knowledge into the brain of that clone. That is another way to do it. And both of those can be done right now. They have the technology to do it. Then there is this one that Corey Good talks about in his explanations of 20 and back, on the reversing of the aging that he went through after being on the Mars mission that he was on for 20 years. So I have a little different view on that, because reversing the aging process that fast, that will create a lot of residue in the body that had to go somewhere, and it's not really explained where it goes, so I'm not so sure how quick it is. But then again, the immortality process, as I'm doing it, and what I talk about in the book here, that is where these 3 doctors got the Nobel Prize in 2009, so that is very valid also. They says in, here's something for you. Go to the Nobel Committee website. Go to 2009. Scroll down to medical submissions and read it. You're going to love what you see. That's where it is explained how this work with the telomeres work and how it can be stopped. Anyway, I don't want to go back there again. So this is, and I'm going to ask you and the listeners a question. This one was posed to me by somebody I talked to here yesterday on the phone, and he asked me, and now I'm asking you, would you do the bidding of the dark side? Have power, have wealth, have prestige in return for immortality?
You're asking me that question? I think I can address that.
I paused on purpose here. I wanted everybody to think. This is the question that the world leaders have been asked.
Yeah, and this is physical mortality is what we're talking then, I guess. Is that right? Or physical immortality?
Immortality, yeah.
Of the body.
Unless, of course, number one of those options that I mentioned is where it's downloaded into an Android. That is not physical, but it looks physical.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, there was some talk of Michael Jackson having done that, actually, before he passed away. That was part of the plans, to capture the soul, essentially, the life essence, and to have it transferred to another encasing or encapsulement of some sort. We're on the same page, I think. You see what I'm getting at? Yeah,
I've heard that too, but the thing is, you can capture memories, you can capture feeling, everything that is lodged in the brain can be captured by a computer chip. The soul, good luck with that. That's not going to work. The soul cannot be captured because it is of such high vibration that physically with a computer, that is not going to work. Now, there may be some higher technologies that could do that, but physically, I don't see how it can work.
Yeah, it's quite a long-standing philosophical conundrum, and something which, for aeons now, people have reflected on, not only just what happens to us after we die, but is there a soul? If so, what is it made up of, and so on and so forth. But here's one for you, Aage. You're a believer, are you not? Or I'm not sure where you stand on this whole issue. Reincarnation. What's your position on that?
Well, I've proven it to myself, so I could say I am not a believer. I know.
Ah, yes, and that's a key word now. The term gnosis is where that's the root of that, apparently. So you've probably studied various Gnostic traditions, I would imagine, from over the course of your lifetime. But yeah, reincarnation. How is it then that reincarnation is a fact?
Well, first of all, through hypnosis, I went back and I found myself in other life situations. So I could, you know, I've been a hypnotist for many years also. So I've taken other people back and they explain previous life situations. In fact, one time that was back in, a long time ago, I took a lady back and she started speaking another language and I didn't understand her. It sounded like a Far Eastern language, but I didn't understand a thing. So, but when I asked something and told her something, she answered. So I kind of thought there was a communication between us. And now then I continued, and she answered in that language, and I just continued. We recorded it, and I after the session was over, I ran it to her, and she sat there with her jaw on the floor. She had no clue that she could speak that language, so I didn't know what to do with it. And then I mentioned it to another guy, and he said, "Oh, I know this guy down at the University of Minnesota. He's in the language department. Talk to him." So I called him and he said, "Send it to me." I sent it to him and I didn't hear anymore it took 6 months, and I got an envelope back with, he had sent it to a friend of his at the University of Osaka in Japan. And they found that this was a language that was pretty much abolished about 1,000 years ago. But they knew enough to be able to understand well over half of what she said. So that came back in a transcript.
And what was it exactly then that she had been saying?
Oh, she explained that she was a farmer's wife. She was living way out in the very northern part of what is now Japan, and she explained a little bit about her life and things like that. So it was probably about maybe 10 minutes she talked.
And you spontaneously began speaking in the same ancient...
Oh, no.
Okay. I thought I'd heard you say that you had some sort of something
we had a
came over you.
I spoke to her in English, and she seemed to say something whenever I said something, so I figured that was an answer.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I just continued.
Isn't that amazing? How about that? Well, is this documented in any of your books?
I don't think so.
Definite food for thought.
Yeah, because I can't find the tape anymore. It's in a box somewhere, and I just can't. It's there, so when I go through it one day, then I'll probably find it. But I can't really prove it, so that's probably why I didn't talk about it.
Isn't that something? So, well, yeah, reincarnation is, for me, I'm not sure if any others have reflected on this or not, but the very fact that we're here in the first place, I know you brought up the name reference George Carlin earlier. This is one of the things that deeply puzzled him as well, too. Just the fact that we're here to begin with. That's what he couldn't quite get his head around. And he was no dummy, as I think most people well understand. So for me, though, frankly, that's the greatest proof, as well as, anecdotal or, testimonies such as what you've provided here with past life recollections and so forth. And there's documentaries on YouTube as well, too, which... many people have seen that talk about how, former World War II bomber pilots, or even the case of a boy being reincarnated and having past life memories so that he was actually able to go back and hold the people who had murdered him to account in this life as just a boy who had been reborn as a child with those memories. So, but for me, really, the biggest evidence is the fact that we're here to begin with. We will be again. We disappear, we come, we go, and we're back again. And from the Buddhist perspective, really, the Bodhisattva is the central type character, really, and principle of sorts that
we simply return to help others. That's all we're here for. We don't come back because we want to have more food to fill our bellies, or to have more sex, or watch more movies, or anything else
No.
that you can add to that list. But just, we're here to help others. That's the purpose to life is that, helping others. And Tom
Yeah.
Schaefer, I think, gets that one, his service to others principle and
Oh yeah, absolutely heavy on
commitment.
that.
Sure.
Yeah, he's right on target. And I tell you though, what I have found is that nothing dies. It is what we call death is no big deal. We kind of graduate or even flunked out sometimes, but we do leave here, and we're either we graduate or get kicked out of school, but we do come back for more learning until we don't have to come back anymore. And two of the criteria for not having to come back is to understand who we are. That if we think physical existence is all there is, yeah, we're going to come back. But if we understand that there is nothing here physical, it is only a mental projection from the mind behind what we think is our body and brain. And our mind create everything that we see in our surroundings. All and everything that happens to us is our own doing. Once we start understanding who we are and what we are, then we don't have to come back here anymore. We go to a different level and learn more. See, if I compare our soul or what we are to something that is very simple to do, I would do it this way. Look at a forest. Let's say if you take, there's trees, if you plant one tree in the middle of a field, and this tree expands itself by the root system. So the roots expand a little bit, and one little part of the root comes up, and it becomes another tree. From there on, the root go on again, and it comes up. So let's say after 10 years, you got a whole bunch of small trees in that field. But underground, it is the same organism. It just looks separate above ground. That is also us. The universal consciousness that we are part of is the same thing for all of us, but we are a little sparked offshoot off of that consciousness, so we all look and feel and appear different. Even our consciousness is different, because it's a little different spark off of the original universal consciousness. That's what our soul is. It is individual learning for the purpose of gaining and coming back and joining back with that light force again. That's what I saw in my download.
Ah, the download. So that was one of the questions we had for you here. Actually, it's something that we weren't too sure about, but definitely wanted to ask you. So if you could go into more detail, others such as Grant Cameron and I'm not sure who else exactly, David Icke, I think, is one, maybe even Graham Hancock as well too, but many people reporting these purported cosmic downloads. So
Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah,
just
and
flesh that out for us a little more, if you would. And go ahead.
People have that, and a lot of them don't talk about it, because especially if you are buried in religion, you wouldn't talk about it, because anything that isn't written in the Bible, or the Quran, that is from Satan, I suppose. But the thing is that a lot of people have it, and even Nikola Tesla said, I saw the past, the present, and the future at the same time.
That's intense.
Yeah.
That's the universal. That's the universal now, I guess. Really, the whole unit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And within that, if you want to look at something specific, then you focus on that specific, and it emerges out of the all, and it comes up in front of you. And if you want to look at something else, you think of that, and then the thing you were looking at disappears into the soup again, and the other thing comes out. So what I was sitting in meditation, and I started seeing light coming out from the periphery of my field of vision around me. and they was focusing in front of my eyes, and that ball of light in front of me became bigger and bigger and bigger until it kind of was around me. And then I started seeing things in this light that was more like inventions. There were concept formulas, ideas, and people, and strange people, some of them. And I was more concentrating on what interested me, so that was flashed for me. And this whole thing, just a few seconds, and it came and it went, slowly faded out. But the good thing about those kinds of events is that they are burned into your memory a lot more than or better than other memories are. So I still have a lot of that. And I don't know how much I've forgotten, but I'm probably quite a few things that I've forgotten, but a lot of it is still there. So these kinds of downloads is not common, but a lot of people get it, especially coming out of meditation. If you're not meditating, you should. We are going to start a meditation class. In fact, we're going to also teach astral travel. So this is something. Stay in touch with us and join us on the mastermind, and you can be part of this.
Just looking right now, speaking of balls of light and energies surrounding us in spiritual form, this photo that you use here as your avatar on Skype. It's also something we've included in this week's streaming slideshow. What is the history of that picture? Was it taken around the time of your download?
Oh, no. This is much older. That was probably in 1995, 6, something like that. It was taken while I still was back in Omaha. There was a lady that came through town. She had some very elaborate Carillion photography equipment. And what we did, we sat there and she surrounded us with a very high voltage magnetic field, and she had a camera outside of the field, and she took a picture into the field, and that way we could see the colors that was coming from us. And as you can see, there's a lot of white. I didn't do anything to manipulate anything, but we took quite a few pictures, and I found that by what I was thinking, I could change the color of the aura. And on my website, I have a picture where I was a totally different color, and that was because of what I was thinking. That was done shortly after the other one. So yeah, you can, whatever you think changes your aura and your vibration on the outside.
What if you are meditating on emptiness? What happens then?
Then it'll probably turn back to the regular vibration that you are most of the time, which this is probably the one you're looking at there. Is I did not try to manipulate anything. I was just sitting there emptying my mind out, and when she took the picture.
Big shout out to Joey Boomer, Val, as well as Tommy Shutter, Pirate Joe Emanon, of course, too, out in Suffolk County, Long Island, New York. Kat Goida, it appears, has dropped in to join us here this week as well. So, show segment, episode number 129 of Pirate Radio Podcast. Our special guest, Tucson, Arizona resident, former airline pilot, live streamer, author, documentary filmmaker, among many other things, Aage Nost. We've only got another 15 minutes or so here, Aage, and I'm wondering, we've talked about your books, we've shared the links and directed people to your Amazon profile page. We've covered the Secret Space Program. I'm not sure how much we've really gone into that. You brought up the name Corey Goode. A controversial figure, to say the least. One of the questions I suppose I would have for you is, how is it that we are able to distinguish between disinformation and the straight goods when it comes to any conversation regarding the secret space program? And in particular, maybe this would be a good kind of tie into what I had set aside here, actually, was a question that came to us this week via your friend and mine, Tom Shutter, a.k.a. Free Cosmos. The question that he had was with respect to Randy Kramer, the interview which was just recently released, stating that the audio quality was a little rough, but says it's worth a listen nonetheless. Not saying that Randy Kramer necessarily is completely full of it and promoting a disinformation agenda, but just maybe two separate questions. Disinformation with respect to the secret space program, how we distinguish between the straight goods and disinformation. And secondly, did you get a chance to check out the interview, the conversation that Tom had recently with Randy Kramer?
I have not listened to that one again, but I tell you though, when it comes to these people that are coming out like this as whistleblowers, we got to remember something, and that is that the Black Project, they have been doing this for a long time. They have been had unlimited funding, and they are 50 to 100 or more years of us in technology. So I am open to many of these things. I think it is very possible. If we think of it in terms of what the technology we see anytime we walk out the door at home, that would be impossible. But that's not the way the world is. Most of what we know is not so. This technology that they have been working out here underground in Nevada and the manufacturing plants on the moon and whatever they have on Mars, it is so far ahead of us that I don't see why it would not be possible. I am totally convinced that I know we have a basis on, when I say we, I mean the US government, the Germans have bases on the moon. And back in the early 1960s, there was a CIA or a government document that came out. Yeah, they recognized that there were 57 different extraterrestrials visiting Earth. And I'm sure they found more of them by now. And what we see on the moon is that there are manufacturing plants up there where they are building spacecraft. And they have unlimited funding to do it. And they are not necessarily a good place. They are, the Germans are up there, they have their own enclave. In fact, on my website, in those 4,000 pictures that you find on my website, www.universal-consciousness-show.com. In the picture section, I have pictures of the building that the Germans fell in love with when they found it. It looks like a swastika. And no, that's not the one that came out of the movie. This one is different. And in fact, if you want to really get out there, I also have some picture evidence of time travel on there. I don't know where it is in there. I think it's about halfway into the stream of pictures. So there's some interesting things you can go look at there.
That's via your website, AageNost.com. I think there's a hyphen between the Aage and the Nost as well, too. Is that not the case?
That website has it also. The universal-consciousness-show. That's the one where I have a lot more stuff now. So, but that will also lead you to the other one.
The Universal Consciousness Show. Yeah, you've got a lot of projects on the go. What is the latest then from that particular live stream? What's you've got a lot of I think it's been around now for the past couple of years, and
Yeah.
you must have a lot of interviews archived. Let's hear a little more
Uh,
information about the Universal Consciousness Show.
Well, that is archived on the Universal Show's website. And I also have some blogs on there, and you can read those blogs. They're quite interesting. And otherwise, the 4,400 pictures of anything from humanoids or people walking on the moon's surface, NASA prints, to people on Mars, spacecrafts, and unbelievable things that really shouldn't exist, but it does. It's kind of fun to. I try to put three to five pictures on there every day, so it's been a long journey. But the Universal Consciousness Show started with me and Diana Serafim over in Germany. She's got a tremendous mind. She's my co-host, and we been doing this probably for a little over a year and a half. And she actually has an interesting story. She was very ill and her health was failing. And she totally cured herself by thinking herself well, by epigenetics. That's what the new term for that kind of thing is. So we're trying to spread the good word, just like you are. And we got a show every week.
What time?
It is on Fridays at 2 o'clock in the afternoon East Coast time.
Is that also carried via the Late Night in the Midlands network, LNM? It is.
Yeah,
okay.
It is.
So, Universal Consciousness Show, Broadcast Team Alpha, and I'm not sure what else you have. This is the two main live streams, then, I guess, is what you're involved in.
Yeah, that, and then we do a Sunday show on Broadcast Team Alpha. We do a show on Sunday, and that is we're on there for an hour talking about, that's 3 o'clock in the afternoon East Coast time, I think it is. And we have a subject that we talking about the universal laws for the next 3 shows, and explain how you can work with them and you're going to have amazing things happening in your life. And we kind of pick a subject that we stay with for each month, and then we may even do some interviews after a bit. So we're having a lot of fun with it, and we're getting a lot of good information, get some really top-notch people there. And what I would really hope for people is that subscribe to our YouTube channels, because then we can send you a little information when a new YouTube movie comes out, and it'll help us too.
That is indeed one of the things that everyone listening needs to be reminded of, something we don't talk enough about, this business of subscribing to our YouTube channels. Absolutely. Aage's and Broadcast Team Alpha's, as well as ours here, Pirate Radio Podcasts. And we've got to actually try to get ourselves up to the 1,000 subscriber mark, at which point we'll actually be able to qualify for monetization once again. YouTube, unfortunately, they rearranged the goalposts there and took away that was taken out of the equation, unfortunately. So hopefully we can make our way back up to that mark, 1,000 member subscriber level, and they won't decide to change things around again. But we've had a lot of activity here in the YouTube live streaming chat peanut gallery area. One of the things that we've got, though, just as a direct question, and really that's what we always look forward to, are people that really lay it out there for us. But Val is asking, do you remember that ship on the moon and girl in it, or was it real or a hoax? I think I know what she's talking about, actually. Are you familiar with that story?
I have some several pictures of ships NASA prints of ships sitting on the moon's surface, but I don't know anything about a girl.
This was an Asian type looking woman who was frozen, I believe.
Okay, that one. Yeah, that was Apollo 20, I think.
Could have been. Yes, that sounds about right.
Yeah, because they never told us they did that, Apollo 20. And I'm not sure of that, but it would be perfectly liable. I mean, yeah, I could go for that, but I don't know. I don't know anything about that.
Why is it that people put so much, and I guess when it comes right down to it as well, too, let's not kid ourselves, government agencies and the like, but they put so much time, effort, energy, money into pulling the wool over so many people's eyes and perpetuating these hoaxes and frauds? Why do it, Aage? What's the point?
Well, see, knowledge is power. As long as they can keep us from having knowledge, that returns to their power. And I think that, the head of the Skunk Works, back in about 20 years ago, he did say that we have the technology to bring ET home. And it would not take a lifetime to do it. If you've seen it on TV, on Star Trek, we've been there, done that. So yeah, there's technologies out there that is amazing. So that girl on the moon could very well be real, but I don't know. The Germans went there in 1945. Wernher von Braun came to the U.S. and told the Americans all about what they did.
He did he? How about that? Could you just, in brief, provide more detail then? Because I guess this would serve as the framework, or at least the history, the origins of the secret space program.
Yeah, that's where it probably started, what the United States is concerned, because of paperclip, because they imported, we're told a different number, but there were about 3,300 people that, or scientists and higher ranking German soldiers and people that came over and promised in return for not being killed, they would work for the U.S. government. And it was a good trade what they're concerned. And they brought the technology of the Germans with them. Wernher von Braun, he was in charge of the rocket program. And some of his buddies, they were in charge of the round disc programs. And the Germans, they built flying discs, or what we call flying saucers, and they had the Haunebu 1. There was many before that, but the Haunebu 1 became the Haunebu 2. The Haunebu 1 was so unstable that it kept crashing on it. They couldn't find any pilot to fly it, so they improved it, became the Haunebu 2, and that was very stable, very fast. And in my file somewhere, I have the test results of a Haunebu 2 that went from the surface to 60,000 feet of altitude, straight up, in a matter of 3 minutes. That is pretty fast going against gravity. And they had the Thule Engine with the Mercury engine, actually, that... there's a design to that is now being redone by several countries, actually, technology. The Chinese is working on it, and the Russians, they've already perfected it. The Russians have their own flying disc program, as well as the US have, and it started with the Germans. The Germans built a base on the moon. They built one in under the ice in Antarctica. And they had a Haunebu 4, which was a big flying disc, was 140 meters across. And they sent, as far as I know, they built 2 of them. The one they sent to Mars. And they lost contact with it, so they don't really know what happened to it. Nobody knows what happened to it. Maybe by now they may have found it there. Who knows? Maybe they know, but from what anybody else, we don't know what happened to it. but there were 163 known flying discs, according to Wendell Stevens, Colonel Wendell Stevens, when I had him on my TV show and interviewed him 3 times while I was in Tucson here. And he said there was 163 flying discs that the Germans built. That is verifiable. And they were very fast. They could fly from pole to pole in a matter of 30 minutes.
The Nazi Bell, I believe, is what you just recently referenced. I think what some people have speculated actually is what crashed back in 1965, December of that year in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. So, and just that aside, let me just see, I think we might have to just correct you, or at least get clarification on what it was exactly you said. But with respect to this the vertical liftoff of the craft, 0 to 60 feet in 3 minutes is what
No. 60,000 feet.
Oh, 60,000 feet. Oh, because I was thinking, well, if it's 0 to 60 feet, it must be 3 seconds. But 60,000 feet. Well, and what would it be then from 0 to 60 feet? About 3 seconds, or maybe?
Well, that's about 10 miles up, you know. So.
Jeez. Oh my God. Wow. Well, how about that? Well, it's something that I'm definitely going to have to look into a little more, as well as I would imagine will, some of this week's, the listeners, people that have dropped by the live stream here, show number 129 of Pirate Radio Podcast with Aage Nost. We were hoping the third time would be a charm, and I think things have come together quite well this week. Aage, I've had a great time, and we managed to really cover a lot of ground and get a lot of insight from your end of things. Pretty decent turnout, up to, I think it was about 9 people there at one point via the peanut gallery there over on YouTube and the chat area. So just in closing then, any final thoughts? Of course, we've got your websites here, your URL website addresses, and we're gonna have to take a look at what we got exactly, but Aage-Nost.com and broadcastteamalpha.com. On Facebook, just simply Aage Nost. We did a Twitter search for you, actually, hashtag Aage Nost. It's amazing how much, in fact, I should track that link down for you and send it to you. The search results for hashtag Aage Nost, it's amazing how much we just so happen to be affiliated and associated with that. So you might get a kick out of it when I share it with you. But just any closing thoughts or comments you'd like to share with our listeners, Aage?
Well, I would say we live in a mind-created universe, so whatever's in your mind is what you're going to have in your life. Guard your mind with vengeance. Don't let anybody tear into it and destroy it. Be careful who you associate with. Associate up. If you have an energy vampire, even in your house, distance yourself from it. Just guard your mind and take care of yourself and do the best you can and do more research. Just read and read. Remember, readers are leaders. So not just watch videos are wonderful, we learn a lot from them, but also read. Something happens when you read. It goes into a different part of brain. So there is connections through the universal mind, through books, through videos, and everything we do. So join us on the mastermind group. Send us a link, an email address and your name to broadcast Team Alpha, and we will get back to you. And I tell you, this is a ride that could be very interesting, and you can be part of it.
What do you think we're going to witness here over the course of the next decade or so, approximately, as we find ourselves in the lead up to 2030? and everything that has been laid out for us, I suppose, and in store, being planned behind the scenes. Any pronouncements or anything predictions that you would perhaps like to leave us with?
Well, there is an alien agenda, and there will be a form of disclosure, and it won't come from government. There is no way they're going to give up that power, but it will come from ET himself. They will make themselves known. It will be so many of them in the sky that sooner or later, and it's going to be sooner, government can say no longer, oh, it's just hallucinations, to release, because ET himself will force the issue. And besides that, I went to, about 2 months ago, actually a month ago, I went to a government website that showed that there was 57,300 sealed indictments. And normally, that was in 1 year that was put on there. And normally during 1 year, it was only 1,000. So there is 56,000 more indictments since our present president have been in office. So there is things happening behind the scenes. Those people that think that the only thing they see, he does some stupid things on Twitter and places. If that's the only thing they judge what he's doing on, then they're not seeing the whole picture. There is more happening behind the scenes, and we are going to find out when the time comes. And I think we saw a little bit of that possibly getting closer here, because one of the Supreme Court judges fell and broke 3 of her ribs, and I think she's on her way out of the Supreme Court. So that means there's a new one coming in. That means that the dark side has lost power in the Supreme Court, and then things can start happening.
In a nutshell, what are these sealed indictments pertaining to exactly then? I'm not too clear on what it is. There has been a lot of talk about the thousands of sealed indictments. There's a new attorney general, too, let's not forget, that's just come in to replace Jeff Sessions. So what do you foresee this all leading to then exactly, with respect to the the sealed indictments and the new attorney general, and as you say, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I guess is her name. People have to excuse me. I do my best to keep up on top of American politics as best I can. Former, Canadian expat living here in Korea as long as I have. It's all through the internet that I managed to glean what I can. But yeah, just in the context of things, what then? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the new attorney general, these sealed indictments. What are the implications? Just in, what can you say to that?
Well, it all goes back to draining the swamp. And you get all the pedophiles, and you get all the corrupt and treasonous government officials out of there. And not so sure you're going to get all of it, but there will be a lot of cleanup, and it's on its way. Watch and see.
And there you go. Hashtag DTS. Well, we'll see. It's been said that, a lot of stories too. Trump and his administration doing a lot of work to address the pedophilia issue that has been so rampant throughout institutional politics for so long. Hollyweird as well too, as it's often known. So we'll see how that all plays out here over the long term. You talk a lot of Buddhism, really, whether you realize it or not, Aage. I sit here and I listen to you, the way that you just, present your thoughts and philosophies on life. So protection of one's mind and one's thoughts, absolutely. Watching these thoughts arise. And, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Enlightenment, meaning there's 2 ways of looking at that. I'm not sure if you've realized this over the years or not, looking at that word, but the light going off, the eureka moment, awakening to some realization or another, is one way of seeing it. Secondly, of course, relieving oneself of the burden that they have on their shoulders. So they're lightening their load. So I always get a kick out of that. And I always enjoy, once again, and very much get a kick out of having the chance and opportunity to speak with you Augie. It's the meeting of two minds is what it is often referred to as. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to stick around or have time for the hour-long Rogues Gallery after show. It is an optional affair out there in Arizona. Don't know what your time schedule is like. We'll talk about that more as we go off the air here, wrap things up, and then see where things stand. In the meantime, though, folks, friends, foes, and fellow pirate mateys, thanks so much for choosing us, your favorite independent, online, open-sourced intelligence node, Pirate Radio Podcasts. Got a lot of other great guests coming up here over the course of November. Mike Hopkins, U.S. expat, now living in Sweden for the past number of years, a poet, Minds.com personality with a fair number of thoughts and insight, his own views and opinions regarding what's been taking place in Sweden the last number of years, and within the context of the recent election in particular. Augie, what we'll do actually while we just make our way through the outro here is get you to mute yourself, and we'll just continue just to wrap up here and talk to you on the backside of things here. But so we got, yes, once again, just to remind listeners, Mike Hopkins coming up, and then, of course, the JFK Annual Roundtable on the 23rd, I believe is what it is, with Robert Morningstar and a couple of other guests as well, too, including potentially the likes of Kaiser Schuff and someone who just joined us in our recent anonymous roundtable a couple weeks ago, Fox Azur, sometimes known as Fox Navir. Do subscribe to us here. The YouTube channel that we have in place, we get up to that 1,000 number subscriber mark once again, and we will be able to have the channel monetized. So that's definitely a goal that we have in mind here. Operation Secret Santa coming up in just a couple of weeks as well, too, kicking off on the 15th of December. So a lot of things on the go here. Be sure to drop by and see what we have going on via Minds.com as well, too. Pirate Radio Network. My personal channel via Minds is Jaffe Ryder. Definitely drop by and engage us there. Drop us a line. We'll help to do our best to show you the ropes. Joey Boomer, just in closing here, talking about Dark Journalist. Val, bit of a shout out here to Trump, I guess. Always find a mixed bag. Supporters on both sides of the aisle, as it were. So I think that about does it, folks. Be sure to like, remind, comment, do what you can to help spread the word. Let the world know World Pirate Radio Podcast Network is a happening thing. And we look forward to seeing you again until we meet at that time again out on the high digital seas. On behalf of Captain Long John Sinclair, all the rest of the crew here on the Robin Hood, I'm your host, as always, the show's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.
I know.
There we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments, checking every level, switch, dial, cable, knob, and pulley, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time once again to drop anchor inside Mystic Bay and draw an end to another week of Pirate Radio Podcasts. Remember, if you're looking for a little more lively online action, keep in mind we've likely got yet another great free-flowing Rogues Gallery after show coming up for the next hour in either Skype, Google Hangouts, or Appear.in. Also, if you've in any way enjoyed or found yourself benefiting from the shows we've tirelessly produced over the past 2 years, you might want to drop by our Patreon tip jar page and lend a little support. Half of all network donations go directly to charity. Help to keep those numbers growing over on Patreon, and we'll be able to extend even more of a generous pirate hand. Looking forward now to the balance of 2018, we're still not quite yet booked. So if you yourself have a new, novel, intriguing, or otherwise underreported idea, unique individual, or pressing item in mind, be sure to either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email via pirateoneradio@gmail.com. We're always open to exploring fresh creative suggestions, intriguing guest ideas, cutting-edge discussion topics, and captivating themes. You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by either liking, commenting on, subscribing to, or just following us via virtually any mainstream social media platform, including Twitter, Facebook, Google+, or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.